But despite the overwhelming popularity of Shinsengumi, they were only active for about 5 years. 皆さんこんにちは and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. Shinsengumi, if you have ever heard of this name before, I'm pretty sure you're a fan of Rurouni Kenshin, Gintama, or Golden Kamuy. They are a historical group of men who fought through the time of turmoil of westernization and are very famous and popular among the Japanese too. I would say it's almost impossible to find a Japanese that doesn't know about them. But who are they? Why are they so popular? And why are they called the men who lived and died with Bushido, the samurai code? So today, as a man living in Kyoto and training in katanas, I will briefly explain about the history of Shinsengumi and the 3 most important men of the squad. At the end of the video, I will talk about my opinions on why they are so popular among the Japanese. So I hope you can enjoy this video till the end. And even if you get confused somewhere during the story, that's okay. I will wrap everything up again at the end of the video in today's conclusion. 大将の冠はてめえの頭の上にあるんじゃねえ。みんなの理想の上にあるもんだ。Let me first briefly explain about the history of Shinsengumi by breaking it down into 3 points. 1. Formed as a police association. 2. Played an active part in stopping terrorists. 3. Betrayed and killed. 1. Formed as a police association. In order to understand how and why Shinsengumi was formed, we need to understand the historical background at that time. The Edo period is famous for being a peaceful era in Japanese history that lasted for more than 200 years. There are multiple reasons for why this was possible. For example, there was a strict class system that clearly divided the people into 4 groups to keep them in their place, as well as policies to make the samurai poor in order to prevent them from overthrowing the government. But one of the most famous measures taken by the Edo shogunate was to restrict trade and movement to foreign countries. This was mainly meant to stop Christianity from coming into Japan, because they believed it would risk the absolute rule of the government. However, this isolation system was brought into question in 1853 when the United States Navy, led by Matthew Kelberth Perry, came to Japan. They forced Japan to open for trade because the US wanted to use Japan as a place to replenish food and water. At this time, they were hunting whales near the oceans of Japan for oil to use for lamps and lubricant oil. The shogunate signed the Nichibei Washin Joyaku and agreed to obey the US, opening the ports for trade, supplying food and water to the US ships, and letting the US consul stay in Japan. Looking at the huge ships and weaponry, the shogunate realized there was no way of winning a fight with them. Eventually, Japan signed a similar contract with the UK, followed by France, the Netherlands, and lastly, Russia. This incident brought chaos to Japan. There were some formal samurai clans that became ronin and began terrorist activities to overthrow the shogunate that weakly responded to other countries and keep foreigners out of the country. We can't believe that we have been working as samurai for such a cowardly country for so long. Let's tear down this weak government and start a new generation. Soon, the policemen of the center cities were not enough to protect public order. So when the shogun was going to travel to Kyoto to discuss important matters with the emperor, there was a group of men who was hired to escort him along the way. As the government could not trust most of the samurai anymore, they actually asked the lower-ranked peasants to take this offer, telling them that this is a chance for them to become a samurai. This explains how much power the shogunate government had already lost at this point. 8 peasants and low-ranked samurai who were training swords in Tokyo applied for this offer, believing that this would be their chance to become a noble samurai, which they all dreamed of. These 8 men include the future chief Kondo Isami, the sub-chief Hijikata Toshizo, and first captain Okita Soshi. They were all originally training in the same Kenjutsu dojo. Eventually, the group became bigger as they worked to protect public order in Kyoto, and their loyalty towards the shogunate was recognized. They were officially named Shinsengumi by the chief of Kyoto Shugoshoku, the military governor of Kyoto, Matsudaira Katamori. The peasants who longed to become a noble samurai finally became an official group of policemen who were given the jobs to work for the shogunate. If you are a fan of Gintama, you probably now understand all the settings and must be nodding like crazy. 2. Played an active part in stopping terrorists. Now, let's take a look at the most famous battle fought by the Shinsengumi, which is considered as their biggest achievement as a police organization. It is called the Ikedaya Jiken, the Ikedaya Incident. Shinsengumi was able to get information from one of the terrorists they tortured about a horrifying plan. There was a group of men who were trying to set fire in Kyoto, kill Matsudaira Katamori, the chief of the military governor, and kidnap the emperor to forcibly create a new government. We have to stop this. It's time we fight, Shinsengumi. At 10 p.m. of June 5th, 1864, after searching around the city, they finally found about 30 ronin gathered at a ryokan called Ikedaya, keeping the other members outside. Just 4 members of the squad, including Kondo Isami and Okita Soshi, stepped into the building and started to attack. Although many lives of Shinsengumi members were lost, if not severely injured, the Ikedaya incident made Shinsengumi widely known across the country. They succeeded in preventing a terrible plan from being executed, and thus their work was praised by the Edo shogunate. 3. Betrayed and killed. However, their glory did not last long. Several clans that were carrying out terrorist activities separately formed an alliance to work together to attack the shogunate. Also, the former emperor who sought peace passed away, and there was a new emperor who took the throne. The position of the shogunate became weaker and weaker by the day, so they made a big decision. In 1867, they decided to officially return their rights of administration back to the imperial family that the shogunate family had for 265 years. We have no will to fight anymore. We are under the imperial family as one of their subordinates. Before we move on, some of you may be confused about the relationship between the imperial family and the shogunate. The imperial family is said to be the direct descendants of gods and goddesses that created Japan in ancient legends. So they were regarded as representatives of the gods in Japan, meaning they were the only ones that were allowed to decide what Japan should do. Then what is the shogunate? The shogunate system existed from the Kamakura era. It was a government run by samurai. They were able to rule Japan because they have been appointed by the imperial family. This is how the imperial family and the shogunate were able to exist at the same time. This also meant that anyone who was able to convince the imperial family to give them the power to rule Japan could become the official government of Japan. That's why the terrorists that were killed in the Ikedaya incident were trying to kidnap the emperor. During the time of westernization, there were many samurai who protested that the Edo shogunate is not worthy to be the governor of Japan anymore because of their weak responses to foreign countries. The voices of these samurais strengthened the confrontation between the imperial court and the shogunate. So the shogunate, by giving their rights back to the imperial family, wanted to prove that they have no intention of going against the imperial family. I hope you now have a clearer image of those involved. So let's get back to the story. However, this whole event was just a mere formality, and the Edo shogunate were not actually intending to give up ruling Japan, because they were the ones doing it for more than 200 years. The samurai clans who were against the shogunate were not satisfied with this, and they convinced the imperial family to make a political declaration to take all political power away from the Edo shogunate and to create a new government. This was the end of trying to peacefully solve this problem. The formal shogunate and the new government started a war called Boshin Senso that lasted for a year and a half. Shinsengumi was missioned in this battle as well to fight for the formal shogunate. Yes, this is another chance for us to work for the shogunate. Let us fight, Shinsengumi. But when they started to fight on the battlefield, what they saw shocked them. No, that's the Nishiki flag. The terrorists are us. The Nishiki flag is only allowed to be held by the group officially proven as the imperial family's army. Unfortunately for the Shinsengumi, the samurai clans, who were originally called terrorists, succeeded in convincing the imperial family to take away every political power away from the shogunate. Shinsengumi, who thought they were fighting for justice, had easily turned into criminals, and were even betrayed by the formal shogunate that they were working for. They were eventually sent to a battlefield that everyone knew the new government was going to win. This order meant that the formal shogunate did not need the Shinsengumi anymore, and they were sent to their death. The chief, Kondo Isami, was captured by the new government and decapitated, which was the way criminals would be killed and the most miserable way to die. No, please let me commit harakiri. I'm a samurai. You are no samurai, you terrorist. You shall die in shame. His decapitated head was exposed in Kyoto to be shown off to the people. The captain of the first unit, Okita Soshi, died of a disease, never to find out about the death of his leader. The sub-chief, Hijikata Toshizo, was shot in Hokkaido as the last man left of Shinsengumi. This is how the man who longed to be a samurai died sadly, in the age of turmoil. Next, let me introduce the 3 most important and famous men of Shinsengumi that you must keep in mind if you want to understand the squad's history. They are the chief, Kondo Isami, the sub-chief, Hijikata Toshizo, and captain of the first unit, Okita Soshi, the 3 I mentioned just now. 1. Kondo Isami. First, let's talk about the chief, Kondo Isami. He was born in 1834 in Tokyo as the 3rd son of a peasant's family, with the birth name of Miyagawa Katsugoro. In 1848, when he was 14 years old, he entered a kenjutsu dojo called Shieikan, which belonged to the Tenne Rishin style. This style of swords is still practiced today. Since the area where the dojo was located was under the direct control of the shogunate, there were relatively a large number of farmers who were conscious of fighting for the shogunate and protecting the shogun. Naturally, many farmers will learn swordsmanship, and the young Katsugoro was one of them. Katsugoro improved his skills with swords until the dojo owner, Kondo Shusuke, recognized him. Just after a year from entering the dojo, he achieved full proficiency in the style, and he was given his master's last name, Kondo. From there, he called himself Kondo Isami. 2. Hijikata Toshizo. Next, let's talk about the history of the sub-chief, Hijikata Toshizo. Hijikata was also born in Tokyo in 1835 as the 10th child of a peasant's family. Because his parents had both died by the time he was 6 years old, he was raised by the wife of his older brother. Although he would later be known as the fearful demon vice chief of the Shinsengumi, he was quite a troublemaker as a child. When he was sent to a draper to work, he had problems with women and even punched his boss. Hijikata also loved to train in swords, and he trained in many different dojos. One day, his older sister's husband entered Shiekan and decided to create a training area in their home. The instructor who came to teach them there was Kondo Isami. They both had dreams of becoming a samurai and fighting for the shogunate, and it didn't take time for them to become like brothers. By the way, although Hijikata was famous for his rough and fast-paced personality, he was influenced by his grandfather and his brother who were poets, and he loved writing and reading poems himself. The 41 poems he wrote are now gathered together and kept in a museum in Tokyo. 3. Okita Soshi. Lastly, let's take a look at the life of Okita Soshi, the captain of the 1st unit. Okita was born in 1842 in Tokyo. He lost his parents when he was about 4 to 5 years old. Okita Soshi was the oldest son, but he could not succeed in the family as he was still young. Therefore, his sister inherited the family instead. When he was 8 years old, he was sent to Shiekan to be taken care of because his family was too poor to look after him. Okita was a very talented swordsman, and he was able to compete with adults, achieved full proficiency at a young age, and served as the head of the school. He admired Kondo Isami like a real brother, and it is said that Kondo also loved him like a younger brother. Despite his talented skills as a swordsman, he had a weak constitution. After the Ikedaya incident, he was not able to fight in the front lines anymore. He died at the age of 27 due to tuberculosis, just months after Kondo Isami was captured and executed. Then lastly, let me talk about why these men are so popular. When I usually talk about the history of traditional culture in my channel, I always say the 400 years of tea ceremony history, the 600 years of no history, and the 1,500 years of sumo history and such. But despite the overwhelming popularity of Shinsengumi, they were only active for about 5 years. What attracts Japanese people so much, even when they have such a short history? There is no concrete answer to this question, but these are the 3 main reasons that are often brought up. 1. Their Bushido and loyalty. 2. Sympathy for a tragic hero. 3. The fiction stories of books, dramas, and movies. 1. Their Bushido and loyalty. As I have talked about in the history of the 3 main characters, they were all peasants or from a low samurai class who hoped to fight for the shogunate someday. They learned about the noble samurai and their Bushido as they grew up, and dreamed of becoming one themselves as they trained the sword. When they actually got the chance and formed Shinsengumi, They must have been really happy from the deepest part of their hearts. The members were more samurai-like than the actual samurai, and their mind and souls of Bushido can be seen through these two things. One is their uniform, and the other is their rules. The Shinsengumi members wore this uniform called haori. Its color is called asagi, and pattern is called dandara. And there is a kanji character, makoto, in the back. All three of these things represent their loyalty and readiness to die in battle. The asagi color was used for the kimono worn by the samurai who would commit harakiri. The dandara pattern is taken from the clothes that the famous akoroshi, also known for the 47 ronin, wore. Lastly, the kanji character makoto means honesty or truthfulness. If you add up these three elements, it means they will fight with loyalty and honesty for their lord, like the 47 ronin, and are willing to risk their lives in battle, and are ready to die anytime. Although it has a nice light color and a cool kanji, it actually has a pretty scary meaning. Next, there is the famous rules of Shinsengumi called the Kyokuchu Hatto. This was a list of rules that the Shinsengumi members must either not do or to follow to keep order within the group. But what made this list of rules so special is that if anyone were to break these rules, they will be sentenced to harakiri. Harakiri is the famous way the samurai committed suicide, to take responsibility for any faults and to die with honor. And it wasn't something that peasants or those from classes other than samurai would ever do. By presenting and living by these rules, they were determined to be samurai and peasants no more. Them being straightforward and simply awesome like characters in anime and manga surely is one of the reasons they are so popular. 2. Sympathy for a tragic hero. You probably noticed from when I introduced the history of Shinsengumi that they were only active for 5 years with not too many achievements. And in the end, they couldn't even protect the shogun and all died after losing. Why would so many people cheer for a group that lost in the end? Many point out that this is because of the Japanese tendency to like and feel compassion towards the stories of tragic heroes, rather than those who are victorious. For example, there are more stories left of Minamoto no Yoshitsune, the younger brother, who was betrayed and killed by his older brother, Minamoto no Yoritomo, who started the first shogunate in the 12th century. Or the stories of Sanada Yukimura from the Sengoku era that lost to Tokugawa Ieyasu, but fought with loyalty and bravery to his death. You might think that the winner would be praised more, right? But in Japan, it's often the other way around. So the way Shinsengumi members knew they were already betrayed by their lord they trusted, but still fought to their death, fascinates the hearts of Japanese. 3. The fiction stories of books, dramas, and movies. Although the past two reasons I introduced are not completely false, there is one thing that we cannot ignore. The fact that Shinsengumi has been idealized in movies, manga, and anime on too many levels. As I explained in the history part, Shinsengumi became the new government's enemy in the end. So until the first half of the 20th century, they were remembered as criminals among the Japanese people. If their Bushido was so admired, and Japanese people loved stories of tragic heroes, Shinsengumi should have been loved much sooner in history, right? Shinsengumi first turned from villains to heroes among Japanese due to novels being written about them. For example, one of the oldest books written about them was written in 1928 called Shinsengumi Shimatsuki. This book was already a fiction, but it had a big influence on all the other stories that were to be written in the future. The most famous novels about Shinsengumi would surely be Shinsengumi Keppuroku and Moeo Ken, both published in 1962. This brought many fans to Shinsengumi with its dramatic and tragic stories. Both of these novels were aired as television dramas too. And there is going to be another movie of Moeo Ken in October 2021. This is how much these stories are still popular today. However, it's just like the samurai and ninja and anime and video games. Many point out that in these novels and dramas, the stories of Shinsengumi are far too idealized, and the reality couldn't possibly have been like it is written. Of course, these authors have clearly stated that their stories are fiction, but many Japanese still believe that they are all true. However, there is one thing I would like to say about this. While there are many people who argue that these stories are too unrealistic, I personally think that it's okay to enjoy them, because no one knows for sure what happened in the past. And it's not fun at all to just attack each other, saying who's right and wrong. I say that we can just enjoy the stories of samurai, ninja, and Shinsengumi as a kind of entertainment. It's even done in traditional culture like No and Kabuki. There's really nothing to be angry about, and being historically accurate is not always correct. At least that's what I think. What would you say? Then lastly, today's conclusion. The history of Shinsengumi can be broken down into 3 points. 1. Formed as a police association. Shinsengumi was formed to work for the Edo shogunate and protect the public order of Kyoto, where many ronin were scheming to overthrow the government. The Shinsengumi were a group of men who longed to become samurai to fight for the shogun. 2. Played an active part in stopping terrorists. One of the most biggest and famous achievements of Shinsengumi is the Ikedaya Jiken. They were able to stop a terrible plan of terrorists trying to kill the chief of the military governor, set fire in Kyoto, and kidnap the emperor. Shinsengumi was widely known across the country, and the evaluation from the Edo shogunate increased. 3. Betrayed and killed. However, once the terrorist clans formed an alliance and their attacks grew stronger and stronger, the situation began to change. The imperial family chose the formal terrorists as their official army, meaning that the old shogunate and Shinsengumi were the ones now considered terrorists. Sadly, as the old shogunate fought with the new government, they quickly decided to abandon Shinsengumi. Although the Shinsengumi members knew they were betrayed, they fought for the shogun to their death. The 3 most famous members of Shinsengumi are the chief, Kondo Isami, vice commander, Hijikata Toshizo, and captain of the first unit, Okita Soshi. They were all peasants or from a lower class who were born and brought up in current Tokyo and met and trained at the same Kenjutsu dojo. They all had dreams of becoming a noble samurai, fighting and dedicating their lives to protect their lords. There are mainly 3 reasons why Shinsengumi are still so popular today. 1. Their Bushido and loyalty. Shinsengumi lived the way of Bushido more than the real samurai. The color and design of their uniform represented their readiness to fight and die for their lord. They also had unique rules within the squad to keep order, and anyone who would break these would be sentenced to harakiri. 2. Sympathy for a tragic hero. Japanese people tend to cheer for the losing team or who fights to protect someone to their death. The Shinsengumi squad only has an active history of 5 years and have very few achievements, but their honesty and bravery is admired by by the Japanese. 3. Fictional stories of novels, dramas, and movies. We cannot ignore the fact that the fiction novels, dramas, and movies portraying them have exaggerated their stories. It's just like how the samurai and ninja couldn't have been depicted in subculture. It's nothing bad, but we need to keep in mind that most of what we know now of Shinsengumi is mostly fiction. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to deepen your understanding towards the history and culture of Shinsengumi, please hit the like button to let me know. And my goal is to achieve 100,000 subscribers by January 2022, so your help would mean a lot. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。Everyone, once again, thank you very much for watching this video and welcome to the Omake Talk. So, in today's Omake Talk, I wanted to explain about that I actually, when I explained about the history of Shinsengumi today, I made it really short. So, to be able to, to explain it in this one video, but it's still, longer than 30 minutes. I just wanted to say that there's actually a lot more you can study about them. Like, for example, I talked about their history as if they were called Shinsengumi from the beginning to the end, but actually in the beginning when they started to protect, work as policemen in Kyoto, they weren't originally called Shinsengumi, they were called different names and at the end, before Shinsengumi was about to, collapse and end, they were actually giving a different name too. So Shinsengumi was the longest and most noble name, I guess I should say, that they had, but it wasn't the only name they had. They had different names, they had different members that I wasn't able to introduce today, like the famous Nagakura Shinpachi, which is, Shinpachi from Gintama, that Shinpachi, the glasses, and also Saito Hajime, which would be Saito Shimaru, I think, in Gintama, and also appears in Rurouni Kenshin. I didn't get to talk about them either. But the three most talented swordsmen in Shinsengumi was said to be Okita Soji and Nagakura Shinpachi and Saito Hajime. So these three were said to be the strongest. So I really hope you can study about Shinsengumi yourself and take a closer look at their history. There's actually a lot more to learn about. And again, it's really fun and interesting. So I hope this video can be like the beginning, the first step for you to learn more about Shinsengumi. And I really love Gintama, by the way. You might have noticed through the thumbnail and my video today. I love Gintama the most, actually, of all the anime I've ever watched. And in the beginning, I said one of the phrases that Kondo says during the anime, and that's probably my favorite phrase of him, and definitely Kondo is my favorite character of Shinsengumi and Gintama, yes. And I have my wife next to me, so I'd like to ask her which character she likes the most. What do you like the most? Yamazaki, maybe? Anpan? I already answered Kondo, so. Oh yeah, definitely, yes. He's really strong, exactly. The point is that he wasn't, in real life, Okita Soji was really, his body was weak. Although he was really good at swords, his body was weak. But in Gintama, that's not actually reflected into the story at all. So that's one thing, but yeah, he is a really cool character. Alright, so everyone, again, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you again soon. I hope you enjoyed watching. Goodbye.